So welcome everybody. We appreciate you being here for the round two of Banding Together, where we're going to talk about writing skills. My name is Alan. I own a company called Phoenix Staff. We'll just go around to the panelists real quick and have everybody introduce themselves. And we'll start with Sharon Bondurant.
Yeah, thanks, Alan. So I'm Sharon. I own a company called The Finders. It's an umbrella for tech finders, HR finders, and finance finders. So we have 3 divisions, and we're celebrating our 22nd year as of May 1st. So I'm excited to talk to everyone.
Happy anniversary.
Thank you.
Who would like to jump in? Sean, why don't you go next?
Hello, everyone. My name is Sean Plowman. I am a principal in a company called Boost HR and Recruiting, which we started just last September of 2019. So second go around at having ownership in a recruiting company, and focus mainly with small and mid-sized businesses and helping them with their talent acquisition efforts. So glad to be here today.
Christian Kaiser.
My name is Christian, and I founded Career Evolutions right at the bottom of last time's depression in 2008-9. Career Evolutions is the name of the firm, and we're a full life cycle employment company, and we try to help candidates and clients throughout the entire cycle of hiring people and working with people, and at times also, unfortunately, downsizing. So I'm excited to be here today and share some thoughts about effective writing.
Mr. Nick Morrison.
Hi, everybody. My name is Nick Morrison. I own and run a company called Potiri, and employee engagement is what we're all about. And so we provide professional services as well as technology products in order to advance employee motivation in organizations. And our ultimate goal is to get to 100% employee engagement.
Excellent. Well, we are talking about writing, as we mentioned. So I'm going to do a little screen share here. We're going to start off with a very quick poll. If I can make this happen. Oh, that's right. I was doing this. I was trying to help you when we first started. Let me see. Hold, please. There we go. All right, everybody grab their phone because you're going to need your phone for this part of the session. There's going to be a QR code that pops up. Just go ahead and scan that code. That will get you into Slido. Give you a couple seconds to do that. All right, so the first question, if everybody's ready. A little bit of an icebreaker here. Has anyone here ever won a Pulitzer Prize? Not yet. I love the not yets. All right, we don't have a single yes yet. That's good news. I was a little worried we were going to be talking to a Pulitzer Prize winner about writing. That's good. Second question, on a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being perfect, how good is your writing ability? I like it. That's good news. Got some good writers here. Final question. What is the most important thing to write really well when searching for a job? All right, so I'm curious. We'll let everybody read through this because it looks like a couple people have not answered yet. But I'm curious from our panelists, leaving this question on the screen for a second. Panelists, what would you, okay, they're now almost universally all of the above. Somebody read a recent post by me and thought it was thank you note.
That was a good post, by the way.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. So what, in our panelists' minds, what would you guys say? I'm sure you guys probably voted as well, but what is the most important thing to write really well when searching for a job?
I'd say all the above. I would agree with the active poll.
Yeah, definitely, because there's certain touch points like you outlined here, Alan, but I mean, really, every touch point that you have with a potential employer is very important. It's setting yourself either above, everyone else, or you're going to mix in with the rest of the crowd. So anything that you can do to set yourself above, the rest of the candidate pool is going to be super helpful in your job search.
Yep.
Alan, I would also add that most of these that you've listed are introductions or, from our side to a potential employer. But in some cases, like the LinkedIn profile, nowadays, obviously, individuals are looking on social media to make sure that those things match. Not only that they match our resumes and what the story we're telling on our LinkedIn profile, but the writing on our profile, right? If the writing on our profile is really shoddy, but the writing in all of our other areas where we've interacted in touch points, as Sharon said, then there's a disconnect there, and it puts a seed of doubt in the potential employer for sure.
Right. Nick, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, if I had to maybe pick one out, I would say the introduction of why you're applying. Oftentimes what I find is the resume, the cover letter, the LinkedIn, they could be rather clinical. And what I really want to know is the why of somebody. Like, why are you really interested in the position? How does this company and the role align with your personal mission, vision, values? And it's the one place where you can really express a lot of creative ability and really express who you are. And so I really like that, and to know why you're interested, why you would be a fit, and how you see this fitting in for your life.
Perfect. Yeah, and that's actually the first question that we already got in the Q&A. So I encourage everybody to go to the Q&A and fire questions off as you come up with them. But the first question we have is, can you contrast the introduction versus the cover letter? So I think you just touched on it a little bit, Nick, and Sean, I know you're a fan of cover letters, and I know that is, something that not every recruiter, not every HR professional is a fan of. So I'm curious from you, is what Nick just said part of what you look for in the cover letter, or is that different?
No, it absolutely is the why. I think a maybe average cover letter would be a cover letter where somebody basically says, I'm writing you this cover letter to apply for the following position. That's obvious and doesn't really need to be stated, right? And so in that first paragraph, there's an opportunity to, first of all, maybe share your excitement about a position, but then maybe show that you've done some homework, right? In that first paragraph, that you've done some homework on their company, excited about the growth that's happening at your company, would love to be a part of that. I see that you guys are doing this and this and this. And it just shows, it sets you apart from other people, because other people that write cover letters typically, it's the standard, I'm sending you this letter because I want to apply for this job. They already know you want to apply for the job, so it goes unsaid. So you can take that first couple of sentences, differentiate yourself by some research that you've done to really target and give the why you're applying. You're excited about their product, you're excited about their service, you're excited about their growth, but have specifics of the why to Nick's point, I think really sets you apart.
Yeah. Sharon, what about you? As introduction versus cover letter, do you see those things as starkly different? Do you see those things as the same?
No, I think what Nick was saying is spot on, because that is an area where you really can go into what values you see that company having that match with what you can bring to the company. So I think that is definitely one area, as well as the cover letter. Like what Sean was saying, I mean, anything that you can do that shows that you researched the company, that you know what the company does, and you know more about the role. I mean, you can set up search alerts for that company if you're really targeting a specific company that you want to get a position or a role with. So anything that you can do to show that you did that research is really going to set you apart.
Right. And Christian, with regards to introductions, are you a fan of cover letters first? First of
I
all?
am actually. You know, I ultimately I'm a fan of what works, as long as it's truthful. But cover letters, yes, absolutely. I think that many of us struggle with cover letters. But one thing that I wanted to add on top of what has already been said is if you struggle with writing cover letters, one easy way to do it is just think of your cover letter as a T. So you have an intro and a close at the bottom, but in the middle you can have two columns, your requirements, my qualifications, and then you pick maybe the 3, 4, or maybe in some cases 5 requirements that matches your background the most. One of the mistakes that people make is that they have boilerplate template cover letters that speaks in generalities. Another mistake that people make is they spend an awful lot of time talking about all the things that they don't do and they can't do and how they can overcome that. My view is that you should strike from a position of strength. And then finally, the thing that I think is very, very helpful to mention too is LinkedIn is a beautiful database. If you're able to address any kind of communication to the hiring manager, that will be far more superior than to whom it may concern or dear HR. And then, of course, introductory documents, emails, big fan of that as well.
Okay.
Hey,
Now,
Alan,
go ahead.
I just wanted to add, Christian said something I think is very important to understand, and I think we established this on last week's call a little bit, just the work that it takes to find a job. And it's a full-time job trying to find a job. That said, a cover letter should never be the same cover letter for every single job. You should write a new cover letter for every job. Now, when I say new, it's not from start to finish new necessarily, but there's some pieces in there that are specific to that company. And so they need to be changed in every situation. The research needs to be shown that you did the research. And so I think one of the tendencies we fall into, and it's easy to do, is we have the one cover letter and it doesn't always fit really well. And we just send it along and hope that something happens. And that strategy, and especially in this market, will not get you kind of standing out from the crowd.
Right. No, I think, you know, the final thought that I have on that introduction versus cover letter, there's, in my mind's eye anyway, there's the introduction of you as you're submitting the resume. And then there's what I would encourage people to do, which is introduce yourself before you even know there's a job posted. And I think that is one of the ways, you know, when we talked last week about differentiating yourself or trying to stand out in this this market where everybody's, you know, vying for positions, or everybody will be vying for positions. One way to really separate yourself from the pack is to be proactive and target companies and introduce yourself to hiring managers or specific people within an organization before there's even a job posted. And that introduction of you to a company, when you're not attaching a resume, when you're not applying to a specific job, is a very critical piece, in my opinion, to also write well. And, you know, that would be a cold introduction, essentially. And we're all, you know, the panelists are all in sales. So we do that all day, every day. And I would encourage people, if you're scared or nervous or questioning how to do that, that's where we can come in very handy. You know, we can help you very coldly introduce yourself and why you're reaching out to somebody in a non-intrusive and non-confrontational or not a difficult way. That, you know, a little bit different than a cover letter, you know, and certainly an area that we can touch on if you'd like, but I just want to address that, and hopefully that answered the question from that attendee.
Hey, Alan, I think it's a good time to say this because we've talked about it as a group. If there's anybody on this call that is struggling with a cover letter, has a cover letter, and they want it to be looked at with another set of eyes, I would say any one of us 5 would be happy to look at that, help you with it. And so we want to offer that for sure. And then outside of that, anytime you're having communication like this, I think it's always good to have a second set of eyes. So whether it's one of us or a friend, share it with a friend first. Say, hey, do you think this is a good cover letter? I want to send it to this company. I'm really excited about this job. I'm nervous about sending it. Will you look it over? And guess what? They might find some misspelled words. They might find some other errors or just grammatical, whatever it is. But they're going to give you their opinion. And if they're a good friend, they'll give you their real opinion that might be beneficial, right, for you. So it's important in any of our writing, and that goes with everything else on here. Resume, follow-up, thank you note. Always ask for another set of eyes. There's nothing wrong with that in our circle of friends to ask for another set of eyes before you do something.
Yeah. Do you have anything to add to that, Nick? I know you and I have talked about that as well. I mean, I think opinions matter greatly.
Huge, yeah. Well, funny distinction that I'll put to that. I've heard oftentimes that like sales positions, for example, or there's some positions where they actually like accuracy is maybe less important. And so I've heard some things where like, hey, it's okay to have maybe some formatting errors or some spelling errors because it shows that you're really accurate. What I say to that is like, no, not at all, because it shows that you're not utilizing the resources around you. Like everybody ought to have things really well presented, looking great in really good fashion, not just people that are in marketing are expected to do that in your job, because you are expected to ask the person or the people around you, how am I doing? How does this look? Could it be better? They're expected to do that on a job. So it's like for every position, grade A quality is expected.
Yep.
Yeah, that's a good point. And it just made me think, there's some candidates where I will correspond with them in a text, sometimes even for my internal postings, we'll start communicating, maybe I'll interview them, and then they'll be, following up with a text. And that's another important area for, our audience. We really want to make sure that whatever you write and communicate should be, thought of, especially text, because sometimes we're really informal. And I've had texts from candidates where I'm like, okay, they don't capitalize their I's, their periods aren't there. And I'm looking at it, I'm like, and there's a typo, and very quickly that can really eliminate them from the pool, and they might not even know it because their resume is good, it's good. But then when they started texting, it was, there's typos and all kinds of things. So just be careful, when you are texting, that really should be seen as, part of the interview process when you're communicating.
That's a really good point. That, I hadn't even thought about that really, because there's not, I don't do a ton of that, Sharon, but you're absolutely right. I mean, that's a representation of who you are, and you have to do it as if it's, a potential hiring manager or interviewer, not your best friend around the corner or whatever.
Right. Or even if you're coordinating, let's say you're working through a recruiter, really you should be thinking of that recruiter as, as a hiring person, because sometimes I've had, not only internal candidates, but candidates that I'm assisting, and their texts will be, like they're talking to their buddy and not, a hiring manager. So
right.
Yeah. Keep that in mind.
Good point. So I do have a question for the panelists here with regards to LinkedIn profiles, resumes, or, profiles just of a person and cover letters and everything like that. How do you all feel about paying for that service? And I'm not looking to poo-poo in any way people that have that business and do that for a living. But when do you recommend people do that? Or when would you suggest people, possibly don't need necessarily to do that?
I think that's a great question. Whenever I come across, we've written over 1,200 resumes since we started. Whenever I come across a candidate who does not, or a person who's looking, or a professional who wants help with the resume, if they clearly don't need more than just some pointers, a set and second eyes, where we just kind of glance things over, you should never have to pay for that. That's just, everybody should be able to help at that level. If you have nothing, which sometimes people actually find themselves in when they worked for a company for 10, 15, 20 years and they've never had to build a resume, building a resume from scratch in such an area can be daunting, especially if you struggle with writing. And I think it would be absolutely helpful to have someone help with that process. But it's also a learning process. So sometimes I view it as a life skill. And if you're able to learn from the experience, truth is, in the future, if you're a good writer, you don't need to pay for the service in the future because you may have learned how to do it moving forward. So, long story short is I think it depends on the scenario and the need and also time available. Sometimes there are executives who are fantastic writers, but they just simply don't have the time. And they're in a hurry where the resume or the documents need to be produced the same day. And in such a situation, it's time sensitive.
Right.
Yeah, that's perfect. I'll piggyback on that. It typically comes down to time or expertise. If you don't have the time to do it, you hire a professional. If you don't have the expertise or access to it, then you hire a professional. What Christian mentioned, what most people don't realize is they typically have access to the expertise, either from some of their friends, colleagues, a mentor that you used to work with, somebody in that fashion around you normally have access. Also, aside from that, there are a number of public resources available to help people through this. And so there are government grants, you may not actually have to pay for it. There are government grants that they give to people to pay for resume services. So you might be able to get that for free. Also, you could go back if you maybe a part of an alumni association, a high school or a university. They may have resources for you on resume tips, brushing that up. There are nonprofits out there. They're involved, an organization that I'm really involved with. It's called St. Joseph the Worker. They offer all of those services to the general public at zero cost. You come in and do it. And so if you don't have access to it, or you want different expertise to do it, or don't have the time, but oftentimes you can find those resources for free, or somebody else will pay for it.
Yeah,
Sean or
I mean,
Sharon?
I think it's helpful if someone hasn't been looking for a position for a while, in the last 5 years. I think, using an expert to help pull out, a lot of times we're doing so many different things in our day-to-day that sometimes we don't realize what we've actually done and accomplished. So I think if you do have someone that can help pull that out and format it correctly and use the right keywords that are really going to get the hiring leaders interested in you, especially nowadays with all the AI and recruiting tools that people are using in LinkedIn. The more you know how to put those keywords in effectively, the more your resume is going to get seen and viewed. So sometimes if you feel that you don't have that expertise, I think going out and getting it and investing in that you can use over and over, I think it's definitely a good investment.
Yeah. Anything to add to that, Sean?
I think everything's been said. I don't think there's a right or wrong answer, whether you pay for that service or don't pay for that service. I think it's been established through this panel that a lot of that service does not need to be paid for. There's plenty of professionals out there. I would again just encourage people that to reach out to people that you respect for help. Whether it's your resume, your cover letter, your LinkedIn profile. Say, hey, I'm kind of struggling with this. Will you take a look at this? I'm a firm believer, Alan, that people like to help people, and people feel good about helping people. So reach out to those that you respect in your lives, whether it's a former manager, a mentor of some sort, or just a good friend. And having different sets of eyes is so helpful, and they'll help. So
yeah, I would say the only thing, and I'm sure we're all in the recruiting world. I'm sure we've witnessed this as many times as any, but know what is on it. If somebody wrote your resume for you and you get asked questions about it and you haven't read through it yourself, or you don't know exactly how it was worded by the person who wrote it for you, and everybody's laughing because I know you've experienced it. Oh, what does it say? That's not good form. That's just not good form. So know what is in your resume, whether you write it or somebody else writes it for you. Know what it says. How do you feel about the writing of the resume in comparison to the writing of the LinkedIn profile? How much should they match? Should they match completely? Is there, conception one way or the other on how that should look or how that should shake out?
Well, that's a good question, Alan. And I think, again, I'll preface it with it depends. For instance, I'll share this. I think that they should look somewhat different. A resume is a resume, and a profile on LinkedIn is a profile on LinkedIn. For me, it's okay sometimes to use the word I on LinkedIn, but not necessarily at all in a resume. I also think that in general, the LinkedIn profile should be somewhat of a condensed version of a resume. That said, when you have a highly technical background where you're using technology that most of us can't even spell to, you may want to put it in there because ultimately LinkedIn is also a database, and it will be unfortunate if you trim it so much that you remove some of the technical terms and miss out being a candidate, because the truth is the recruiters also use LinkedIn every day to do searches. And if that one keyword isn't in there, which is very important in the technical world, then that will be unfortunate. But in general, there should be some differences. And if I had to favor, I would favor a little bit of a shorter presentation in the LinkedIn profile when compared to a resume. LinkedIn profile obviously offers so many other things as well on top of just the content that we write about in terms of our job history.
Anyone else want to chime in?
Yeah, I'll second Christian. I also believe that using the first person on a LinkedIn profile is totally appropriate to do that. Not so on a resume. I think we've all been trained that way about resumes, but I think on a LinkedIn profile it is. So I think that's a great point, Christian. The other thing I would say about your LinkedIn profile is utilize the summary space on your LinkedIn profile. I think that's extremely important. You've got a couple of paragraphs there on the summary area. And that's often what is seen by those who are looking through. They don't necessarily go too far down. I think they will verify dates, right? This goes without saying maybe, but I'll say it. You know, they need to match the dates on your resume. It's like the biggest red flag in the world, right? And sometimes it even gets to the point where people don't even contact people because they see something wrong there. And so they don't even contact you. So make sure dates are there. But as far as the summary, take that summary and those couple of paragraphs to really, really sell yourself and set yourself apart and have keywords in there, right, that recruiters and talent acquisition leaders will see.
Yep.
Yeah, so I'll double down on that, Sean. What has to be the same are the companies, the titles, and the dates that you were there. Has to be the same. And if you put 7 years of your previous experience on your resume, don't put 15 on your LinkedIn. They've got to match. Also, the other two things that I would put in there that has to be, or that are different, are the picture and then also endorsements. Yeah. So you've got to, put a picture on there and not a picture from a wedding or a party you went to 10 years ago. Like, put a professional picture in there, something that's related to the job. And then also you're going to have endorsements, endorsements on LinkedIn that you wouldn't otherwise have. And so don't be shy to reach out to the people that you worked with in the past, whether they be coworkers, bosses, vendors, customers, whoever you are interacting with. Get some recommendations and some endorsements on there.
Yeah, and I'll just add to that when we were talking about the positions, make sure your titles match too, that you're not putting a different title on your resume for a particular role. So make sure that that matches completely to LinkedIn as well.
Yep. Yeah, and I was just curious. I don't really have anything to add to that. I was just curious about that from this panel. Just kind of going around the panel real quickly, from the perspective of just writing, period, what are some of the biggest mistakes that you have seen people make, be it in a resume or a cover letter or things that just should not be as prevalent, I guess? And the one that came to mind for me as I was thinking about this, actually there's two. I think there's a perceived value in adding words. And people just drone and they say the same things 5 or 6 different ways, but it's the exact same thing. So they like to add words, and I don't know why that is. I would encourage people, and I don't know that the panel would agree, I would encourage people to go through and try to remove as much as they can versus add as much as they can. You want to be clear, you want to be concise. I'm not saying you should have a 1-page resume, by the way. That is not the goal of this. The goal is to say what you need to say, but say it succinctly, and don't drone like I'm doing right now. The other thing is to not add jargon. If the way your things are written, if the way you have written or somebody else has written the things that you're presenting, make sure it's in your voice. To me, your voice matters. And when you're speaking through the written form, it has to sound like you sound. And if somebody else writes it for you and there's a lot of jargon and you're like, wow, that sounds really impressive. Wow, I'd hire me. Maybe that's right for you. Maybe that works, but it also could be changed slightly and altered slightly to make it more who you are and who you know you yourself to be, versus inflating or jargon filling your resume. And that's just my 2 cents, but I kind of want to go around the horn.
Well, I can add to that, Alan. The age-old question, how long should a resume be, is one that is heard every day. And the truth is, when you're early in your career, you should be able to put it all in one page. Now, while we were going to college, we were told often that there are senators who have a one-page resume too, to which I say, well, they haven't done anything. So that's why they can put it all on one page. So it's okay when you have been working for a while to spill into 2 pages, but the moment you spill into 2 pages, you really should have enough content that, to Alan's point, makes a difference to fill out the 2 pages. So use the space then to use both pages. Then the final thing I wanted to add is that just think about your profession. Earlier when we started out our career writing resumes many, many years ago, I met a lawyer who wanted a creative resume. So I said, okay, so I wrote a creative resume and I was using more of a format of a marketer. Well, he was horrified and I had to redo it. You know, mind you, this was 10 years ago. And the reality is there's certain professions where it is expected to look in a certain way and you kind of have to fall in line. And attorneys is certainly one such profession. You just simply can't come across with a creative designer kind of a look and feel resume for such a profession. And then vice versa. You know, creative people like to see creative documents and productions. And if you come with an attorney resume, you may lose out on the job.
Very good point.
Mhm.
Yeah, the creatives certainly have a different way of writing a resume, and it works for creatives, but it doesn't necessarily work for somebody in engineering to do the exact same sort of deal.
Right. What is your take, you guys, on references? Do you feel that should be included on a resume, or do you think that should be, you know, at a later time given out? What's your thoughts on that?
Later.
Later.
Yeah,
Absolutely
I would
later.
say later.
I would say upon request is the best way to do that. You know, I mean, I think if you put them on there, you know, phone calls might be made without you knowing, and you know, your references might be a little sick of getting phone calls out of the blue, you know, and without any kind of a heads up. I think it's probably better to leave that off there.
Yeah, I agree with that. I leave the references off until afterwards and then share those after. What I would share references relative to the resume, and a pitfall that I see in the resume is that there's often a lot of false information in a resume. Not necessarily, and there's been many, many studies shown that something like 65% of the content in resumes are false. And it's not necessarily because people are malicious and they're terrible. It's just that we often have a difficult time recalling facts from the past. And so what I would suggest doing to that is like, and maybe they're even the references that you would have, but take your resume and then hand it to some people that you've worked with in the past and ask them for feedback on that. And then they'll tell you like, hey, it didn't happen like that. That's not how it happened somewhere else. Because guess what? When they go to run those references, when you go and run references, they're going to ask you, what did you guys do together? What was the person working on? That's like one of the more critical components of a reference check. And so make sure whatever they're going to do references on are like true, and that your stories match up.
Yeah, let me just add a little bit. Alan said, you know, he's not saying resume should only be 1 page, and he's accurate, but he's also telling you they shouldn't be 5 pages. He's just not saying that. But right, Alan?
Right.
I mean, that's a little long, but you know, a couple things I think is important, and Alan's really right about this. There's a lot put on a resume just to be put on a resume, and it's a lot of fancy big words that really ultimately really don't mean anything when you actually read the sentence. So what I would say is think of quantifying your results. And so we have a tendency to say, as a salesperson, we increase sales at this company. Quantify it, right? We increase sales by 15% year over year for 5 straight years, something like that. That does a couple of things. It brings legitimacy. It also shows the success. And it also takes someone's eyes and sees that part of the resume. There's something about numbers and so forth that people kind of look to, right? So I think you can do that succinctly with much more success than you can with a long, verbose explanation type thing. So a little more targeted and quantified, I think, is important on resumes.
Yeah. So we've talked about the resume. We've talked about, you know, some of the leading up to. Oh, okay. We just got a question. So before we leave that, let's grab this question. I'll let somebody else field it. I think everybody is able to see it on the panel. So you guys grab that one, because again, opinions are abundant, and I'm guessing we might all have differing opinions.
Well, I'll lead with my favorite lead. The truth is, it depends. It really does depend. It ultimately is what are you looking to do with the document? And for instance, if you have early experience that has absolutely nothing to do with the work that you're looking to pursue as a next step in your career, and that's why you're writing the resume. So for instance, we all may have had jobs during college or high school. As we're hitting our 40s or 20 year into our career, and we're a tax accountant for a CPA firm, that experience doesn't need to be there unless there's some extraordinary circumstance. So I would say look at the content and the relevancy to what you're looking to do. And then the stuff that makes no sense, it's okay to leave that off. Specifically, if you're looking for, you know, space that you want to use to say something in the other jobs.
Yeah, I'll add, I think Christian's right on. There's no set number of years going back, but it could be 10 years and it could be 15 years if it's all relevant, and that's important. And I'll just say it. I mean, you know, as somebody who's 51 years old, right? Sometimes we have a tendency to maybe want to hide that, maybe worried about, you know, people hiring at that age and those kinds of things. And I totally understand that, but I think it's important to own who you are. And it may look like this. It may look like, here's my last 10, 12, 15 years of detailed bullet points, these jobs. And then below that, it may be previous positions. And then just, name of company and title and the dates, right? And that's okay. So the relevancy, is Christian's point, really, really matters. What have you really been doing the last 10 years? I would say is the most important thing. So be really detailed on that. The rest can be more just date related than anything else.
Yeah, I completely agree with that, Sean. And I think that I don't think there is a need to go back 20, 25, 30 years. I think just like you said, doing that 10 to 15 years, the most relevant experience is going to be the best. And then you can, you know, just do a general statement underneath that. The other thing too, and I know this is kind of on a different topic, but as far as degrees, you know, I always coach candidates. You don't necessarily have to put the year that you graduated. You can just put the degree that you had, especially if you are, you know, I just turned 50 in October. So I don't think it's necessary, you know, to put the date that I graduated high school or college on there. So I usually coach candidates that, you know, as long as the degree is on there, that you don't have to specifically put the year. I don't know, do you guys agree with that? What do you tell your candidates?
Agree.
Yeah, and
You agree? Okay.
I would say I totally agree, and I would say even further to that, the positioning of the education matters. I talked to somebody yesterday who recently graduated with their master's degree, and they had it at the very top of the resume. But the work experience and everything that they've been doing matters more. You know, it's more critical to somebody. And again, one guy's opinion. There's going to be 1,000 different opinions that come that gentleman's way. But for me, I'm like, you have a master's degree, you can absolutely tout that and you know, let people know. But I think the experience that you bring to the next company matters more than the fact that you just recently graduated with a master's degree. But again, that's, you know, that's why you ask for opinions.
And I agree with you. I think, Alan, knowing your audience, who that resume is going to go to and what matters to that audience, get that at the top part of your resume. If you're a programmer, then, your skill sets related to programming need to be listed up there instead of at the bottom on the second page, right? They want to see, and especially in an AI and type environment that weeds out resumes, that better be at the first half of the resume, right?
Yeah.
So it's knowing your audience and putting those things first. And most often the degree doesn't have to be there first, and it could be there after all of your experience most often.
Right. Nick, I want you to have a chance to talk about how far back the resume should go before I chime in on that.
I think maybe I agree 100% with what's been said. Maybe something else to that is that just because it's not on the resume doesn't mean you can't talk about it. So oftentimes what a resume can be, I don't know, I'll be playful. It can be like a ticket to the show, right? Or it's just like some small representation of you. It's not holistically all of it. So just because a position maybe that you did 15, 20 years ago, 25 years ago, whenever, 5 years, whenever it was, just because it's not on there and not relevant, doesn't mean you can't talk about it during an interview. So when you're in discussion with them, because there could be something that's like really critical to you that just shaped your life that's really early on that may not necessarily be like abundantly clear to everybody else on how it impacts you. So whether or not it's on there, like you're just using that in order to get in a conversation as a representation of yourself, and then you can talk about the holistic you and all of the positions that may be helpful there.
Yeah.
Hey, that's a great point. Can I add something there, Alan?
Sure.
So Nick, that's a really, really good point. And what I would say is that holistic view, if you think it's important for that role and it's not on your resume, perfect time for the introduction or the cover letter to share that, right? The purpose of the cover letter is not to repeat your resume. It's not the purpose. The purpose is to expand your resume. So if you think that something from 15, 20 years ago that's not on your resume is going to help you, and you want to point it out right there in your cover letter or in your introduction.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and my only comment on it, I'm a 10-year guy. So I say go back 10 years,
yeah.
Except when there's a reason to go farther. So you could go farther. Like I had a conversation with somebody yesterday, and the hiring manager who we were applying or we were presenting his resume to used to work at Cardinal Health. Now they worked at Cardinal Health, 20 something years ago. And this person worked at Cardinal Health 18 something years ago. They wouldn't have known each other likely. They were in different departments in different cities, but I'm like, that's relevant. It was 18 years ago, but the fact that you are both alumni of that company, that to me is relevant. And that will pique their interest in all likelihood. They'll say, wow, when I was there, it was awesome. And this and that, whatever. It's a conversation starter. The other reason to go back farther is if there's rapid progression. So if you started, I have a very good friend who's in San Antonio, Texas as a CIO right now. He started 22 years ago as a Unix admin, and now he's CIO for a global company. That matters. That matters. If he only goes back 10 years, you only know him as a director, VP, and CIO. A little bit farther back, you're going to see that he started as a Unix admin not too long ago in the grand scheme of things. So that's, that to me is interesting. And again, just shows progression. Don't go farther back if you're all choppy, so don't go back 15 years. If you were a CIO 15 years ago and now you're a director, and then you were a manager, and then you became a director again, and then you were, if you're choppy, try to flatten that out as best you can. And to Nick's point, always be truthful, always be honest, everything like that. But, try to flatten the choppiness.
One thing I wanted to add to this is in accounting specifically, recruiters are famous for looking for big four. So they will punch in the word BIG space 4, the number 4. If you have worked with one of the big accounting firms early in your career, my advice is to try to figure out a way to keep that on there, because oftentimes big 4 gets you kind of into the major group, but then the question is immediately, okay, which one was it? EY, PwC, Deloitte & Touche and such. So for accounting professionals who are just graduated out of college many years ago, served a few years with a big 4 agency, and then went on to a corporate career, my advice is to figure out a way to make sure to mention the word big 4 and also include the name of that company that you worked for way back when. That's
great. We have 2 more questions, and I'm excluded from answering one of them. Hopefully you guys see that one. I've been told I'm not allowed to answer.
Well, let's take the first one. If you're in the process of pursuing a business degree, should we add that on our resume or profile? I absolutely, Christian's already said yes on the chat there, but I 100% agree. Shows initiative, anything that shows initiative, further development in your career. I can't tell you how many times we talk to employers, and one of the keys for the position they're trying to fill is they want somebody who's proactive and somebody who wants to grow in their career, and that will show that consistently. And that shows that you're pursuing a degree. So absolutely, I'd have that on your resume.
Yeah,
I second
hear a
that.
Yeah, I
lot.
think
Sorry, guys. I hear a lot from hiring managers, though. They look for people that continually like to learn. I hear that a lot. So the more that you can show that you are continuing your education, whether it's certifications, courses, things that you're interested in, self-study, all of that, including, going back to school and getting your degree, that should definitely be something that you highlight.
yeah, I
Did I
think maybe
interrupt
the
you?
no,
Sorry.
I interrupted you. You're perfect. The only time that I've seen that not work out well, putting education on there, when it's like fun extracurricular learning that doesn't necessarily pertain to your profession, but you really enjoy doing it. So for example, University of Phoenix is prevalent here in Phoenix, where most of us live. And so a lot of people who work at University of Phoenix get free degrees, right? So they may be able to take free courses or get free degrees. And so a fair amount of people, or at least my experience, a fair amount of people who work there get free degrees. So maybe it's a master's degree or a PhD that doesn't really have to pertain with their profession, but they just really want to learn. So it is, yes, extra learning. And oftentimes what the question comes into is, are they switching careers? Are they looking to pivot? Do they not really enjoy this field, but they're getting education in order to go somewhere else? And so I guess you could put it on there, but if you do put it on there, be prepared to sort of explain that. If it is directly in line with your profession and it's like advanced degrees in that line or other certifications, that should be an easy slam dunk. But if for whatever reason it's a deviation from what you're currently doing professionally and you put it on there, you're definitely going to need to explain it.
Hey, Nick, why don't you answer the next question that Alan's not allowed to answer since
Let
me just first say this to Aaron. Alan is a really super good guy, but he's not the end all be all. I mean, come on, he doesn't know everything. No, we're messing with you, Aaron.
He doesn't?
Go ahead, Nick.
Yeah, so what do others think of ending a resume with additional experience available upon request when you do remove positions? I haven't necessarily seen a ton of, makers or breakers relative to that or anybody get really hung up on that. But my thought is that if you put that on there, people will probably start to think, or it may be easy for them to start to think, what else have you not put on the resume? Or why would you not put those positions on there? Is there something trying to be hidden or gaming it? It's sort of strange. Like when people are first entering into relationships, especially like very dedicated relationships like it is in work, we want full transparency. We want to know exactly who you are, right? We don't want anything hidden or anything like that. And so typically it kind of like, people think a little strange about that. So I wouldn't even put that on there, additional experience. But you can bring it up in the conversation, but I wouldn't put it on a resume.
Well, Alan, is that in line with you?
Poker face. I'm doing a poker face, man.
No,
Everybody else, go ahead and chime in.
I agree. I don't think it should be on there. It makes you wonder, like, what are they not telling me?
I agree as well. I think that maybe a better way to phrase it, if you feel like there is information that you want to share, maybe you can just phrase it in some ways that are slightly different, like earlier positions held, and then you kind of mention a couple positions and the companies. It could be a simple one-liner or two-liner at the bottom of your resume, so to speak, in your professional experience section.
Perfect. All right. Well, we've got one other question here. Should skills be in the top or bottom of a resume?
Okay. You know what Christian's going to say? It depends. Go ahead, Christian.
For the most, how about that? For the most, I like to see the skills, areas of expertise right after the summary. So it's like, you got your name, Zorro, and then what you've done, a lot of fencing and winning a lot of battles. And then the skills can come in, what swords you're really good at using. So I like to see it fairly early on, on the first page.
Yeah, I would agree that it should be pretty early on. And again, I know this point has come up before, but if you've done, let's say the job position says they're looking for somebody, just to use technical terminology, and I know not everybody on the call is technical, but let's say you've programmed and you've designed and you've architected in a certain programming language or in a certain scenario, and the position is looking for primarily design, and the architecture and programming is not part of what they post. Those are the skills that should be at the top of your resume. So you should mimic what you see in the job description. Again, being honest, being truthful, being, very delicate to not in any way, shape, or form inflate what you do, but you need to highlight those things that they are specifically asking for and looking for in your resume. So those skills not only should be at the top, but they should be at the front of the top. Again, if you consider yourself to be like we all did, in the beginning, all of us are writers. We all ranked ourselves 6 or higher. So, if we're honest about that, then writing could be one of the highlights of our resumes.
Right. And a lot of times recruiters are looking at the resume, if you're applying directly to a corporate position, sometimes it's a recruiter that might not be familiar with that experience. So the more you can spell out those skills quickly in the top, the more your resume will be, passed on to the hiring leaders. Because usually I think it's like 15 to 20 seconds. Most of the time that's on a resume is quickly, kind of glancing at it. And if they see something that seems to apply to that role, then they're taking time and looking at it more. So the more you can have all of those, keywords and buzzwords and, all the things that are going to attract the recruiter to actually read further, the better you're going to set yourself up to be, moved on to the hiring leader.
Perfect.
Yeah, I think maybe, sorry, my thoughts to that, I really don't care. I think the skills section, what it's most useful for is for search optimization. If people are searching for resumes through a database or online, or you share with them, I think that's where it's most helpful. Quite frankly, for me, what I'm most concerned about in skills is where did you learn it? How did you learn it? And then where did you apply it? And so I'm looking through the jobs themselves, through your resume, on where you were applying all of those skills and where did you learn it. Because there's typically like vast differences in like how people learn it and the depth that they're able to use it and what they're able to do with it. And then so, did they use it in their last position or did they use it 20 years ago, 15 years ago? How well do they know it? And so, put it on the top or the bottom. Top probably seems to make more sense, but make sure you're putting it directly into the positions where you used it and learned it also.
Yeah, I'll add to that, Nick, particularly those of us in tech recruiting over the years. It's so common to see skills listed and there's just a laundry list of skills listed, and then basically see none of those skills in any of their jobs specifically being used. And that's always a red flag for recruiters and for hiring managers. They want to see, when did you last use that programming language? Specifically, what did you use it for? What was the product? Did you use it, 50% of the time, all day long, every day? What was it, that kind of a thing. And it's a red flag if there's a lot of skills and then none of it's in your actual work history in your resume.
Right. So we only have a couple minutes left here, but I do want to kind of go around the horn real quick and talk about, again, the follow-up. So the post presenting yourself, maybe post interview. Well, actually we'll position it that way. Post interview, I'm writing a thank you note. And number one, are thank you notes critical or important in the panelist's opinion? And number two, how should those be written? And what are some of the key ingredients of a thoughtful follow-up or thank you? And Christian, if you want to start.
Sure. I love thank you notes. I absolutely love them. My handwriting is terrible. And as a result, I do get help sometimes when I have to do handwritten notes. But if you don't have the time available to send a handwritten note, certainly writing an email that is well written will be fine as well. Make sure when you write that if you're sending to more than one person at the company that you change it up, because just imagine them comparing your thank you notes. If it looks the same, it's kind of a little chuckle at the office, so to speak. So try to make a point in your thank you notes, and then also be brief and amazing. Lengthy letters is never good. And the thank you note that just says thank you without your signature is probably too short as well. Add a little flair if it's a creative job that you're in or industry. It's okay to kind of think a little bit outside the box. I've seen candidates send thank you notes as a menu, for instance. There was a guy who was working in the restaurant industry, and he built a menu and said thank you in it. And it worked really well for him. Probably wouldn't work so well in some other professions, but it's okay to be somewhat creative when it's appropriate. But I absolutely love them.
Yeah, I agree. I think definitely, a handwritten note these days really makes you stand out. So it should be something that should be done within, immediately. Like if you can get it out the same day that you had your interview, so they get it the very next day, it really is showing, one, that you're conscientious, you have that sense of urgency. And the number of people that do that are so low that by doing that, you're already really setting yourself apart. But then also follow up. I think I like the idea of following up with an email as well, like that same day, like within a couple hours, sending out a nice email and then also sending a handwritten note the next day. But just a couple tips, make sure that you get, let's say you meet with 3 different people, make sure that you're getting the business cards of each person and that you know the right email address and the right spelling of their name, even if it's something like Karen, make sure that you know how to spell that person's name, because there's nothing worse than, sending a handwritten note, but the name's wrong. So those are my couple tips, because I know we're running out of time.
Yeah, so me for thank you notes, it's not even a like, hey, you probably should, or it's nice to have. Like, it's mission critical. You got to give a thank you note. And the hiring cycle today is really fast. It's accelerated. So my rule of thumb anyways, is they've got to know that you're excited and interested. They've got to hear from you by the end of the day. So whenever your interview was, it's got to happen by the end of that day, because they're probably going to make a choice, at least in their mind mentally, on where to move forward or not. So I agree with Sharon. I love the handwritten note, and it so makes people stand out aside from each other. But if you're going to do that and it's going to take a day or two to get it to them, you've got to send them an email. So they've got to have the email, and then they can get the sort of the written correspondence after that. Also, what I would do in there, keep in mind, people hire other people to make their lives easier. And so what I would put in there somewhere in the note I love is like, please let me know, how else I can help you through this process, how I can make your life easier during this process. Use sort of your own language. And then I also like something that expresses your feelings about the role and why. So not like, hey, I'm excited, I'm interested, but like, show why. Here's here's what I discovered and how it aligns with my personal mission, vision, values, and share your excitement. So that way they know that they're not wasting their time on interviewing or moving you forward in the process. You're going to accelerate and come and start.
Yeah, just quick add. I know we're almost out of time. Totally agree on all of that. And to Nick's point, what I would say too is take the opportunity. Make sure that the thank you letter isn't really long. That's one thing, but take advantage of something that happened in the interview where you felt like things really clicked and you knew you were a good fit for the organization. Take that one little point. It might be culture. It might be a specific project where you can help on, and remind them in that thank you note. Excited about this project you got going on. This is where I can help you. Just remind them of that if you felt like that was a moment that really you felt was strong for you.
Yeah, exactly. I second everything that was said already. And to Sean's point, if you're in the interview and hopefully you have a notepad and pen with you, write down something specific that happened. Like, yep. To Christian and Nick's point, if you met with 3 different people or 4 different people, and I think Sharon said it as well, they have to be individualized, and that's a great opportunity to individualize them specific to what happened when you were alone with them. Great job. That's so exciting to hear, that you love your job so much and you've progressed so well or been promoted or whatever. Those things matter. And again, keep it brief. But awesome.
And if you met with 3 people and you're sending the thank you note to one of the 3, all 3 you're sending them to, but each one that you send individually, it was great meeting with you, mention their names and their first names, and it just shows, again, you feel like you could be a part of their team. It's really important. do that.
Mhm.
And again, to everybody's point, send it to a friend before you hit send it to a friend and say, does this look okay? Because I got one yesterday. I mean, I make that suggestion to people all the time. I got one yesterday that needed a lot of help, quite honestly. I mean, they're very well spoken and they're very good at everything, but they didn't write the thank you note very well at all. And hopefully they sent the one that I sent them in a revised format, but it matters. Writing matters. So we are grateful to all of you for being here. Certainly have enjoyed it, and connect with us on LinkedIn. Every post that I put out there, which is a lot, advertising this has all of our LinkedIn profiles. So please connect with us. Please reach out to us. I know each and every one of us is here to help, and anything that you need help writing, please let us know. Oh, and the final question that I have, if everybody could put it in the chat right now, if there is a specific topic for a future webinar that you would like to hear about, just type it in the chat real quick. We'll be able to record those and be able to talk about those next Tuesday. We're going to do these every Tuesday at 11:30. And if there's a specific thing that you would like for us to talk about next week, put it in chat, and that is what we will talk about.
Awesome.
And you've got, I don't know how much time. Oh, that's a great one, Mariama. Love that. Love that. And I'm seeing a lot of nodding heads. So I think all of us are on board with interview prep. Perfect. All right. Well, that'll be fun. We'll do that one next week. So Mariama, thank you very much for that suggestion. And everyone have a great rest of your week, and we'll see you next Tuesday.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.